Welcome again to another episode of the ShopNotes Podcast, a weekly woodworking podcast. I'm your host, Phil Huber, joined with my other co-host, Logan Whitmer and John Doyle. On today's episode, number 55, we are discussing tool choices and tool hoarding and what's the difference.
This episode of the ShopNotes Podcast is brought to you by Woodsmith Magazine. Woodsmith Magazine has been the trusted source for all your woodworking information for over 40 years. From tips and techniques to furniture projects to shop projects, you'll find it all at Woodsmith Magazine. Subscribe today at woodsmith.com.
Okay, so the topic for today's podcast comes from several comments that were made on a YouTube video where I did a tour of my home shop and specifically my big tool cabinet that I had made.
Okay.
Because part of the reason that I made that tool cabinet was to see if I could get all of my woodworking tools into one storage container. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing is if I could do that, to use that as a way to limit what tools I either really needed or used, and following John's one in, one out principle of buying tools. You buy a tool, another one needs to go.
We need to implement that on him when he buys a cart.
They're on wheels. They could go anytime.
Okay.
So anyway, several people commented about that that's not how you do woodworking. Is you just get more tools. You don't get rid of tools. Which I realize is they're doing half in jest and tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. So the most liked comment on that video is from William Murphy. He says, "You have this backwards. When your toolbox fills up, you don't, can I even say it? You don't get rid of tools. You build another toolbox. When your shop fills up with toolboxes, you get a bigger shop. What is wrong with you?" So, yeah, that's it. It's an interesting topic because I kind of am finding myself walking that same path where it's like, I would like to build a tool cabinet, and if the tools don't fit in there, they don't belong in the shop.
Yeah.
And I've kind of been in this cycle with my hand tools, and I've talked about this past, so not to beat a dead horse, but like I started with vintage tools, and then I started buying like nice boutique-y type tools, and I went through a period where I was buying a lot of these boutique tools, a lot of different, Lee Nielsen's and stuff like that. But now I'm at the point where it's like, I'm sitting here, and I think I talked about it a couple of weeks ago, there's a handful of tools that I just don't use very often. Right. Do they really deserve a spot in my shop, or do I keep them knowing that I'll probably have a use for them down the road? It's a hard thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think any hobby or pastime is susceptible to this kind of impulse, whether it's fishing or golf or cooking, that you can gear up to whatever level you want. And it's also really easy because I'd like to think that I'm enough of a nonconformist to think that I'm not susceptible to it, but I am. Where you see a cool tool or accessory or router bit or whatever, and you think, I would use that every day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's not a problem to get more and more tools. The problem becomes when you have so many tools that you aren't using, that they're all kind of piled on top of each other, and you're always digging through those to get to what you actually use. I mean, we were kind of talking about that this morning with all the router bits that we have in the shop. It's like we have all these dull or beaten up router bits that we don't use, or we like look at them and like, oh, this is junk, and then go put it back. We just kind of need to like clean house so we can find the bits that are actually, useful rather than trying to constantly dig through the things that aren't useful.
Oh God, don't let Chris Fitch hear you say that, or else all of our router bits will disappear.
Right. They'll go straight to the dumpster, whether they're good or not, and just start over.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was saying, no, there is that's a completely valid thing, right? Like, if it is, I recently scrapped all my Forstner bits. I went through my drill bit storage cabinet, and every Forstner bit that was in there, I just pitched them, and I ordered one good set.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, it's a valid thing.
Yeah, sometimes you just need to flip the Etch-a-Sketch upside down and shake it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I guess the part of it also for me is I think of, and it's because of my writing here and my time at Woodsmith and ShopNotes is, there are 6 or more different ways to accomplish any woodworking task. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a balance point maybe for finding 1 or 2 methods to do a given operation and kind of sticking with those rather than having a bunch of different ways to accomplish the same task.
Yeah, well, and I think doing that, you kind of hone your process and you get good at it, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, for example, I'm always a table saw tenon type of guy. I know there are a lot of people that aren't. Some people router tables, some people bandsaw, some people hand cut them. Whatever, that's fine. Same way with cutting mortises. Personally, if I have the option, I'm going to use a mortising machine.
Right.
And there are a lot of people that don't. And they'll use their hand router, or they'll use the router table, or hand chop them, or whatever. That's great. I use the mortising machine enough to know that I can get good results with it every time. So,
yeah. See, I used to have a mortising machine for a while, and then I found that, like, rather than take up the space or set that up, I just used a handheld router and jig to do it, and called that good, and saved the footprint of one more tool and compile something else up there.
Yeah.
So
pile something else up there.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, this concept isn't new to woodworking. I think one of the places that I first read about it was there's a guy, Rob Porcaro. I think he's out of Massachusetts, runs the Heartwood woodworking blog. And he's got a tool cabinet that he kind of has the same principle on. He compared it to a sports team where you think of like your salary cap, that you have X amount
you have
of
so much
space, or cap room to be able to deal with tools. So a tool that earns its spot into your tool cabinet has got to pay its way. And Chris Schwarz did that to a certain extent with his Anarchist Tool Chest book and concepts. And I think it's pretty valid because I feel like, when I first started woodworking, part of the joy of it was being able to figure out how to do a given task with the limitations of my small tool kit that I had. And, one of the plus sides is you really get to learn what your tools are capable of that way.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's something to be said for... So in this whole thing, we're talking about, your tool cabinet meant to hold all your tools. When you start getting more tools than that, they start stacking up and piling around in your shop, usually, right? At least in my shop, that's what happens. They end up living under the workbench, or they end up getting stacked on the counter, or they get stacked on the cart, or something like that. And there's something to be said, in my opinion. Clutter drives me nuts. It drives me absolutely nuts. You wouldn't know it looking at the shop behind me, but it does. Like, I am a much happier person with little things, right? Like very few things. Like, I mean, there's stuff I like, but I have zero need in my shop to have more than one router. I just don't. I mean, I have my half-inch router and then my little palm router.
Right.
But I know there's guys that have 6 or 7 or 8, 10, 12 routers at their workbench. I can't do that. It just stresses me out. Like, and I'm a much happier person when I have minimal stuff. My shop is put away and organized. I can see where everything's at. So I guess from that standpoint, that's what led me to start getting rid of my vintage tools. I just had too many of them. And you walk in the shop, it's like, oh my God, what do I grab? Do I grab my number 3? Do I grab my number 4? Do I grab my 4.5? Do I grab my
other number 4?
Little coffin smoother? Yeah, exactly. It's like, limit the options. They all do the same dang thing, right? Mm-hmm. So I would rather have, and that's kind of what I've paired my hand tools down to that, where I have a joiner plane, I have a 4-plane, I have a smoothing plane. Got a handful of block planes, but I have no desire to have a full, complete set of 1 through 8s,
right?
Because I use 3 of those. So it's the same type of mentality of 1 in, 1 out, and buying your way into the tool cabinet, right, or to the tool chest or onto your bench. Is if a tool doesn't get touched, if there's in my shop, if I don't use a tool in 3 or 4 projects, it's probably on the sale block, you know. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't want people that are listening to think that we're saying, oh, if you like to buy a bunch of tools and you like to have a tool for every single task, that's great.
Right.
You know, I have no problem with that. And I have no problem. I think you guys know me well enough to know that if there's a tool that I think is kind of cool, I'm probably going to buy it. And if I use it, I'll keep it. If I don't use it, it's getting resold. Like, I don't have any problem buying and selling a tool.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why it never really has bothered me to drop, $200 or $300 on a hand plane, because I know if I use it, great investment. I'll keep that hand plane from lifetime. If I don't use it, I'll recoup probably 90-95% of my money on it. So
sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of where I'm coming from too is, it's pretty clear that I'm relatively thrifty in equipping my shop and tools or whatever. But I've also heard it in the teaching that I do for like the Des Moines Woodworkers Group or some other places, where, right or wrong, there can be a stigma around woodworking that you can't do woodworking unless you have dropped, like $15,000 worth of equipment.
Sure.
And I think there's a lot of woodworking that you can do for significantly less money.
Oh yeah, completely.
Mm-hmm. So, and I guess I'm trying to view that and put that into practice in my own life. Is, can I do certain woodworking tasks, or can I enjoy this hobby, building a ton of stuff, without feeling like I need this latest, greatest, newest laser guided gizmo, or even essential tools, because I love using hand tools, but is my enjoyment of the craft that much better if I have, and not to pick on anybody, but like a Lee Nielsen hand plane, or a vintage Stanley or Montgomery Ward's plane, or something like that. So
sure. Well, and that answer will be different for everybody.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like, there are people that don't care what the tool is as long as it works.
Yeah.
There are people that like their tools to look good.
Yeah.
And like them to be shiny and brand new,
It's like cars, like there's some people that won't buy a used car, and then there are the same number of people that won't buy a new car,
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and it's funny because we've had this before, and actually we've had people not necessarily question our tool purchases, But like, for example, I have a fret saw and a coping saw. I have a New Concepts fret saw and a blue spruce coping saw. And when I bought the blue spruce coping saw, I did an article on kind of comparing a handful of top coping saws, right?
Right.
And I had one guy that I don't remember where he sent his message through. It was like Twitter or something. He was a little upset that I was showing a $280, $300 coping saw. I mean, yeah, it's an expensive coping saw. I'm assuming that 99% of our readers probably don't care about their coping saw enough to spend that amount of money on there. But it's the same. I mean, people have hobbies that are motorcycles and they have no problem spending, a couple $100 on a set of foot pegs for their motorcycle, or, just stuff like that.
Or golf clubs or horses or
exactly
whatever.
Yeah, like
exactly.
my sister's into biking, and she races competitively.
Sure.
And she's got like 8 bikes, 8 or 9 bikes, and it's all and to me, when I look at it, it's like I have one bike and I enjoy cycling.
It has 2 wheels and pedals, and it was fine.
So from one perspective, like, how do you justify that? Well, if it's your thing and you use it, you're going to value a tool to the extent that you use it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think that is part of why it's interesting in retrospect to look at all of this from like the last couple of years, how my woodworking has evolved and how my tool sets evolved.
Sure.
There was, for a long time, I was trying to convince myself that I'm not a tool hoarder because I had a lot of tools, or not a tool collector, right? Because I had a lot of tools, and I was like, I want every number Stanley ever, not even hand planes. Like, I want the Stanley braces, I want the Stanley auger bit stops, I want all of it. And then I'm like, all of a sudden I look around, I'm like, God, there's so much crap in here. I just can't stand to be near to work. So then, and I'm not, not being super extreme as, some people are, where literally they can't work in their shop because there's so many tools. But it's interesting because my tool set continually gets pared down, which, Phil, you've been woodworking longer than I have. And I think that's probably, you're at that part of your woodworking journey, right? Where your tool set is pretty bared down to what you use.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I think I'm still getting there. But it's not going to stop me from buying a timber framing slick, because I might do timber framing at some point.
Well, and I've noticed this on. Well, here's a case in point. Over Christmas, we exchanged names with family members for Christmas gifts. And whoever had my name was asking for, ideas, and it was related to woodworking because they know that the gifts that I'm going to do are gifts that I've made, projects that I've made. So they wanted something to support that because they know that they'll get better projects out of it. And I was thinking of trying to come up with a list of woodworking related things, and it's like there's just not a lot that I really want anymore. And what the things that I do want are either upgrades for something that I already have, that because I know that I'm going to use it. Like I recently got rid of my 12-inch Craftsman bandsaw and replaced it with a equally vintage Delta bandsaw, a 14-inch. So it's got a little bit more horsepower, a little bit more capacity, but it's still not a, shiny, gigantic welded frame, whatever.
Sure.
Or it's, consumable things where it's, router bits that are going to get dull and need to get replaced, or Forstner bits like you had said, or something like that. So, but that's not to say, like a few years ago, we had a corporate downsizing, and we were cleaning out stuff, and there was a big box of old wood hand planes that we kind of divided up as a staff. And one of the things in there was this. I'll put it up on the show notes page. It's a wood-bodied dado plane.
Sure.
And I picked it up because I'm like, hand tools. This would be super cool. This one is 7/8 wide. It'll cut a 7/8 wide dado. I'm like, I would use this all the time, but it's like, who uses 7/8 dados, And then I was going through stuff the other day and came across in its box a Stanley 39 3/4 dado plane, metal bodied, with the knickers and, everything's there. And it's like, and it looks super cool. It's in the box. I'm like, I would cut dados with a hand plane all the time. So you see something like that and it's really tempting, but on the other hand, I think, would I really? I enjoy using hand planes, but are those the kind of hand planes that I really enjoy using?
Yeah. Well, and I think you end up tailoring your tool set to the type of woodworking you do as well.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny that you said, consumables ended up being on your list. And that this year this was the first year we ever did a Secret Santa. So we filled out like a digital wish list and stuff. Everything I had on there was like consumables. I mean, like the 5-pack of strips of sandpaper for turning, micro mesh sanding pads, CA glue with super pointy, droppers on it and stuff like that. It's like, I'm an old man now. I'm putting stuff that's not fun on my Christmas list. Socks, yes. I did. I put some lifetime warranty socks on my Christmas list, and I didn't get those. Dang it. I'm going to have to order them. I know. But, no, it's funny because I think you end up tailoring your toolkit to what you build. And I'm finding that more from a turning standpoint, too. Because I watch a lot of turners on YouTube and follow a lot of turners. And it just is... It's unbelievable to me when you see somebody standing at their lathe, and almost everybody has the same dang setup. Their lathe is there against the wall. On the wall behind it's a bunch of PVC pipes with 1,000 different tools sticking out of there. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, my turning set fits in a tool roll with tool handles. I mean, because I use you guys have seen it. It's Jimmy's quick release system. So just the tool shank and then a handle, and you can interchange the tool into the handle.
Yeah.
And it's like having that many tools sitting there just gives me anxiety. Like, I would rather use my tools that I know how they work and I can work with them how I want them to, rather than have 75 different tools all in front of me. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, the one thing people don't think about is like the more tools you have is the more like if you have a mortiser, you have to have all the bits, for that, and it's just more things to store and more things to maintain and keep track of. When, like what you're saying, if you only have a handful of tools that you're using, you're going to maintain those, you're going to use those, where to keep track of them, and you're not thinking about, well, now I got to go find this and now I got to go find that. And
right.
It just simplifies everything.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and it's funny because I think it's interesting. I was talking to my dad a couple of weeks ago, and the only person in my family that did a lot of woodworking. I mean, I got kind of the hands-on construction with my dad, but the only person in my family that did a lot of woodworking was my great grandpa, and he passed away at about 101, I think, when he passed away. So he was around my until I was in my 30s, and when he passed away, I got a lot of his tools. So I picked a handful of tools that I wanted from him. He had a little 1x30 belt sander. I got his scroll saw, and I got a handful of other things from him. And I said this to my dad. I was like, it's funny because when I was younger, in my mind, my great grandpa was a phenomenal woodworker, had all the tools you'd ever want. But then as I get older, I realized that, and I said this, I was like, Grandpa didn't have really high quality tools. Like, he had the little like cheapest Delta scroll saw you could buy. I mean, it just was stamped aluminum, wasn't very nice. And my dad said, no, but here's the thing is Grandpa didn't spend a lot of money on tools, but what he had, he could use really well, and he maintained it.
Right.
And I think I'll be the first one to say that a younger generation like me doesn't generally tend to maintain stuff very well. At least as a whole. Now, I'm not going to speak for everybody, but I think as a whole, this disposable type mentality where it's like, oh, that drill bit's dull, throw it away, buy a new one. Where my grandpa would have been like, what are you doing? Give me that. I'm going to go to the bench grinder, sharpen it back up,
See, at least you're throwing it away, where I just throw it back in the drawer.
Yes.
And then just end up with a whole bunch of 1/8 inch drill bits, piled up.
Couldn't drill through cardboard.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and it's funny because it's kind of, now that I'm thinking about this, there's kind of like these little call them microclimates, little microclimates in my shop that I've done the same thing with a much smaller scale, like sharpening. My sharpening setup used to be so like huge and extravagant. A granite slab that's actually sitting right there, sandpaper, bottles. I had sharpening. I had like 4 different sharpening guides. I had angle guides.
Yeah.
And now I'm down to 3 stones in an oil can.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so much more simple. Does it work better? I don't know. But it works better because I like it and I know how to use it. So.
Now, what about you, John? Because I know that because of our work from home scenario over the last year, you've been doing more work in your home shop and have taken some steps to outfit it and equip it. Have you? Where do you fall on the tool wish list versus actual purchase?
Well, first of all, the good news is that my 2-car garage shop can quickly convert down to a 1/4 of a garage shop. I found out because of the recent snowstorm we had this week. Want to get my wife's car in the garage, so having a lot of carts helped. That I could just kind of roll it all into a little corner.
Fair enough.
Pull the car right in, and it took me about a half hour, and good to go.
Nice.
So that was exciting. But so just having a limited amount of space, I found that I don't like to get rid of a lot of tools, especially like the ones for specialty like home projects like plumbing or electrical work or that kind of thing. So I like to, I know I'm not going to use them a lot, so I'll put them either for collected like drywall buckets and kind of put like all my electrical stuff in one, all my plumbing, tiling,
Sure.
that kind of thing. And I'll put those like up in a shelf where I know where they're at, but I'm not constantly, digging through a toolbox and, finding that stuff while I'm looking for my woodworking stuff. So kind of put all the specialty stuff up and out of the way where I know I can get it. And then all the things that I use on every project, I like keep on my pegboard and shelves right above my bench, so they're easy to get to and whatnot. And then all my other like larger tools are mobile, so I can wheel them around the shop or push them into the corner when we get the cars in. So I find that helpful, just working from home and trying to share the garage with the other people in the house. So
that's something I did recently was what you're saying, all the plumbing tools into one Rubbermaid tub. All the tiling and flooring tools go in another, all the drywall goes in another. So because that's the type of stuff that, I hate to admit it, I probably have 7 or 8 different pipe cutters, 7 or 8 different pipe brushes. You know what I mean? 'Cause it's like you have a stupid little project pop up and you're at the hardware store looking around like, I don't know where my pipe cutter is. This one's $3. It's janky, but you know what? It's $3 and it's going to save me time from looking for mine.
Yeah.
Get home, use it. You go throw it in a drawer. You're like, oh, there's the other 4 of them that I own.
Yeah.
So, and again, I think that is a generational thing. Like, where we just, I don't know. I hate to admit it.
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed to admit this, but
Yeah. I don't know if that's like we don't have time to mess around looking for stuff, or it's just easier but go buy some cheap, disposable tool thing and rather than searching for it all day, or I don't know. It's a generational thing or what.
That is something I have found that has helped me, is if I buy a more expensive item, I generally tend to take, I don't want to say that sounds weird, but not that I tend to take care of it, but I know if I spent, for example, I just bought a nice set of 3 countersink bits. I got rid of all my other countersink bits, and every time I use those, I put them back. So I'm like, in my head, I told myself, I'm going to order these. These are going to be the countersink bits that I have. I'm going to keep them nice, keep them where I want them, and I've done well. I've had them for probably eight months now, which is a record for countersink bits for me. So I found that has helped me as well pare stuff down. It's like,
sure.
I don't need 8 different countersink bits. I'm going to buy a nice set of 3. That's all I'm going to have. So
right.
Get a little bit nicer, pare it down.
Yeah, I think that kind of goes back to what we said. Sometimes it's just better to dump out the drawer of accumulated random bits and go, splurge on a nice little set that you can keep track of and you'll take care of, and you know where they're at and where all the sizes are, and just start over.
So let me ask you guys this. This kind of is deviating from it, but not really. If you guys do that, so say you guys dump out all your Brad Point bits at home, where do you go to buy a quality set? Do you trust the Rockler? Do you trust the Amazon? Do you go to a woodworking store? Do you guys go to Menards or Home Depot or Lowe's? Where do you guys go to replace stuff like that with what you
Menards
think is
Tool Shop brand is guaranteed forever. So
it's guaranteed to live in that drawer forever. You mean?
Yeah.
Guaranteed to be metal.
Yeah, I don't know. Usually I go to Amazon for some reason. It's just like they have everything. It's easier to find stuff, but sometimes I'll run to Home Depot and Menards for some stuff. But
for like specialty stuff, we have a woodworking store in town that used to be part of our company, the Woodsmith store. And they usually being a specialty store, usually had higher quality bits and blades and stuff like that. So that's where I would, like table saw blades, a lot of those you can pick up just about anywhere from the major brands that are in decent shape. But, like Brad Point bits, I would get those from the Woodsmith store, or a place like Lee Valley, where I know the quality of it. And they'll even, like Lee Valley, I think on their site is really nice because, they'll have 4 different types of Brad Point bits, and they're going to say, these are your economy bits that are more or less disposable. These are the ones that are going to last a lot longer. This is your top notch. And they've built up a reputation justly of having good customer service and decent materials because they've been forthright about that kind of stuff. So, but for your basic twist bits, I'll just Ace Hardware because I know that a twist bit I'm just using for utility purposes. I'm not demanding high performance out of it.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing when John said Menards Tool Shop brand. I have probably half a dozen of their like 36 count twist bit sets that are free after rebate, which should be the first sign that they aren't worth anything. But they live in the garage, so it's like those are the fire starter bits, the ones that you just push onto metal until it starts smoking. So like if I'm out on the tractor and I need to drill a hole in the bucket or something, those are what I grab. Because it's make a fire real quick and then throw it in the garbage.
Yep.
Yeah, I heard a rumor. You were talking about the Woodsmith store. I heard a rumor that they're online now, that they have a website. You checked that out?
I did, actually, yeah.
Okay. So you can just order your stuff now.
Okay.
Curbside pickup.
Yep.
They don't do 2-day shipping like Amazon does?
To go across, like, what is it? Your house is like a mile from the store.
2
days. 2 days.
Yeah. No, I mean, it is nice if you have a store like that around. The one place I always forget about, and I'm just talking locally in Des Moines, and people may have these around. We have an Acme tool here.
Right.
And Acme tool has a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
Like Woodsmith store is usually my go-to just because we know everybody there, right? We know the people that work there. We frequent there. Phil and I both teach seminars there. So that's usually my go-to because I know, like you said, they have higher quality stuff. But every time I drop my kid off at daycare, and it's right across the street from Acme Tool, and every day I go by and I'm like, they have like 12 dust collectors in the window. There's bandsaw. I mean, they have a ton of stuff. I think they might even be a Festool dealer. I'm not sure.
Yeah, they are.
But I'm like, why do I just not go in there if I need something quick and stupid, instead of running, 10 miles across town to Menards. Granted, there's definitely with hardware stores, there's definitely a convenience factor and then there's a price factor. So it's like, if I'm going to buy a bunch of stuff, I'm going to spend the extra time and drive to where I know it's going to be cheapest. But if I'm buying one or two things, like I had to pick up some black hammered paint the other day, I'm like, I'm going to run to Ace Hardware. I know it's going to be $2 or $3 more than it is to go to Menards and get it, but I don't have to drive 20 minutes to get Menards,
Right.
So, and I'm assuming Ace is probably, or not Ace, Acme is probably the same way, where they're probably a little bit more expensive because they are a specialty store, but
could be, yeah.
I think they're all locally owned, which, is kind of cool.
Okay, let's do a project update. Logan, have you got any farther on your nightstands?
Yes, I brought the wood in, and it's sitting right there. So I have migrated it out of the shop. So no, I actually this last weekend it was kind of a good relaxing weekend. I was doing a lot of my actual job, which was writing and reading and stuff. So the actual job that gets in the way of my fun job. So no, I didn't get much done on them. I did order, so I'm going to try. I don't know how well it's going to show up. This is the David Barron Magnetic Dovetail Guide. Now, he made these a number of years ago. He still makes them, still sells them, but he came out with them a number of years ago. Now there's a bunch of people that have them. I think Jonathan Katz-Moses has one, I think. There's a bunch of people that sell similar things. I think David's was one of the original. But basically, this is a guide for your saw. So you basically lay out your dovetails, slap this on there, line it up, your blade snaps on the side. It's about as accurate as you can get for hand cutting dovetails, or as repeatable. It takes a lot of the thought out of it for the most part. So I wanted to give it a go. I discovered that my back saws, my dovetail saws, so I have a Lee Nielsen, then I have a floor rip. The plates are too short to use this with. And David, when he sells these, he suggests using a pull saw.
Oh, okay.
So I ordered a pull saw this week. We were gifted a gift card from our CEO for Christmas as employees, so I used that to buy a pull saw. So that should be here. What's today, Wednesday? Today's Wednesday. It should be here today. So once it gets here, we're gonna do some practice dovetails with it, make sure it works out how I'm expecting it to, and then we'll be off to the races. So
all right.
Yeah. So
Good.
The only other thing I've messed around with was my showed this guy off last week. I know last week we had some quality issues with video, but this was my little Grecian urn out of Sycamore. Starting to get some bigger cracks in it right there. But I did hit, so one of the things I like about wood turning is it allows you to be a little bit more artsy with stuff, right? So I went to Hobby Lobby and I got a bunch of stuff that I'm going to try on this. So I got some of the, it's the Modern Masters, like it's reactive paint. So it's like paint that actually has bronze powder or copper powder or iron in it or whatever. So I'm going to do this guy like a think I'm gonna do it like a textured green patinaed like bronze type thing. Make a little stand for it, so it looks like it was like something that was dug out of the ground or out of the ocean, you know.
Yeah.
So I might sculpt some barnacles and stuff on it. I think it'd be kind of cool. I mean, it's cracking. It's not going to be a highly polished, you know, clear coat, lacquered and oiled thing. And I wasn't expecting to. This was all about getting the technique down for making these guys, which I think I accomplished. But we'll see if I can get something cool out of it. So I'm excited to kind of play arts and crafts with this thing and see what I can come up with. So that was my that was my extent of woodworking this last week.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I saw you did, after I challenged you last week, you had a little flurry of work on your shop cart. So
you mean the little flurry of me rubbing some filler on it, and that was pretty much it?
Yeah. I mean,
I don't want to lose that. I mean, somebody throws down, you got to come out swinging.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So
yeah, you got a few weeks. So
I know.
Hurry.
Well, to be honest with you, I was going to do more on it, but I saw our shop craftsman Steve had a shaker sewing table in the spray booth. So I'm like, you know, Steve's in there spraying a project right now. Even if I get this thing ready to go into the spray booth, I can't put it in there. So I kind of put the brakes on real quick.
Yeah. I slipped him a 20 to put that in there.
Thanks.
To slow you down.
He told me he was done with it, and then I saw this morning it was back in there. So that 20 must be stretched further than you expected. Yeah. So
yeah, just said go store that in there for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Gotta let it off gas.
Exactly.
So yeah. Well, I told you guys my project. I got everything pushed into the corner of my garage. So I was joking around. I told you guys on Monday this weekend. I was in the bathroom and I had replaced like one of our toilets a year ago and one of them like several years ago, and like never like cut down the brass mounting bolts on them so I could put the little cap covers on them. And they've been kicked around the bathroom for years. And I was like, today is the day. I'm going out to the garage, getting my hacksaw, got those all cut down, snapped the little covers on them, and just like strutting around all day. Like, hey, I got something done.
Yeah.
You know, my wife was not impressed. So,
and I will say, if anybody has ever changed a toilet, they have done that exact same thing. Like, if they say, nope, I installed my toilet and I cut the bolts off right away, they're a liar.
Yeah.
Straight up. I challenge anybody because you're a liar. You've put those little caps on and you think they're going to reach and they don't quite reach and they're hanging out like a 1/4 inch above the little snap base. And yeah.
I should have just drilled a hole in the top of the caps and just slid it right over the bolt and done.
That would have been better, yeah.
Yeah. So,
you know, the worst burn I ever got was from one of those because I cut it off with my angle grinder.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't think, and I reached down and grabbed it to pick it up, and it was like red hot when I grabbed it. Yeah. That was...
Yeah, so that's a project done now. Years in the making. So
is your cabinet next in your basement?
Yes.
Okay.
You know what? I'm going to get that done this year. This is the year.
Okay.
It's going to be glorious.
All right.
So, how about you, Phil?
Well,
What's going on?
Made some progress on my radio cabinet. In the grill work, I'm putting some plexiglass panels, and I got those cut to size, and I sanded the faces of it so it gives kind of a frosted look to it. And then I've started staining some of the edging around the doors and the inner edges of the grill work where it had, I don't know, it's kind of worn away a little bit, and back faces just to get a uniform look to it. I'm hoping this week to get the doors hung on it, which will be kind of nice because that'll take care of any fine tuning for fitting that I need to do. And then now I'm kind of in the stage where I made like a punch list of items that I need to take care of. And some of those, they're relatively easy to do, but it's like you put stain on the adjustable shelf. Well, that takes about 3 minutes to do, but I can't do any more with it for another day or two until the stain dries, and then I got to do the stain on the bottom face and finishing. So I'm making progress on it, and it's kind of fun to see it coming together, and I'm getting there.
Okay.
Kind of fun to see it taking shape the way it's supposed to.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that I'm going to get down to this, like, what do we say, February 19th, so we're going to have our stuff done?
20th, yeah.
20th? Okay, so I'm going to get down there, and I'm going to
Plenty
be like...
of time.
Yeah, it's going to be like the night before we have to record a podcast, and I'm going to be, like, up all night for no reason other than this stupid, egotistic, I'm going to get done by February 20th.
Street cred.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I built that bookcase, what was it, the end of the summer or whatever, that white one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was just going to build this bookcase. I really had no plans for it, and it's sat in my garage since then. Completely finished, really done, but I had no plans for it. So when I was cleaning out the garage to get the car in, I moved it up to my daughter's room, and she's like, "Thanks." I'm like, "What? You can put stuff on it now. Clean your room."
Right.
So,
Awesome.
like, the one project I can get done had no set purpose for it.
Right.
So, I don't know.
I got to start somewhere.
Yep, exactly. So, but
Okay.
All right. Well, we'd like to hear from you on your tool buying and collecting philosophy. You can send us an email, woodsmith@woodsmith.com, or you can put your comments directly in on the YouTube page on our channel, where you can watch the podcast and see some of the things that we've been talking about. Don't forget our show notes page at woodsmith.com/podcasts. Love to hear any questions, comments, or smart remarks that you have. Otherwise, we'll see you next week on another episode of the ShopNotes Podcast. Bye, everybody.
This episode of ShopNotes Podcast is brought to you by Woodsmith Plans. You'll find nearly 1,000 plans covering everything that you'd want to build. From furniture projects to gift projects, kitchen accessories, workshop projects, and jigs and more. Find your next project at woodsmithplans.com.
John, quick, entertain everybody.
okay.
All right.
It's magic.
Great.